Here, welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the dumb things that people will say to you once you have had a stroke or a similar brain injury. People really mean well when disaster strikes, when things are going off the rails. It's not entirely their fault. In fact, it isn't their fault. I think most people genuinely want to say and do helpful things when you first have a major medical life event. However, a lot of the times, what starts off is well-intentioned, and actually, to their credit, people don't know what they don't know. And unless you've been through this before, chances are, myself included, I do this a lot. I often say the wrong thing. That's not because I'm striving to say the wrong thing. That's not because I want to say the wrong thing. It's just that sometimes we want to be genuinely helpful, and sometimes it just comes out the wrong way, or it gets twisted, or, it just winds up being unhelpful. So I think this is kind of partly funny, partly serious, because it is something as a survivor you either know or are going through. You're going through a lot, first of all. You as the individual survivor are kind of initially, you're coming to grips with what's happened, processing things, and it's not that people are saying things that are to be mean or hurtful. Sometimes it is hurtful, but generally speaking, there's kind of the good, the bad, the dumb, and indifferent is what I like to call it. You hear a lot of things in the very early beginning. Some of it, again, is, when you hear it from staff or medical professionals or even people who have been through it, it can be, sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes it's just not the thing you want to hear at the time you want to hear it. And I don't think everything doesn't sink in for everybody at the same time. Again, whether you're the survivor, possibly the caretaker, even as a family member, it takes some adjusting to realize what's happened to a loved one. So there's that dynamic. They're processing it. You're processing it. You want to help. They might not be ready for the help. It's very confusing. So as cliche as it sounds, slow and steady, I think, is the best approach in the beginning. I always joked with my family and, staff at medical facilities is like, don't worry about saying the wrong thing. I don't even know what that is yet. But again, I'm a little different than other people. And so some of the more, I'm going to go through the common unhelpful statements and really try to kind of do my best explanation of here's why this might be unhelpful. Here's why somebody might take it incorrectly. And then, as a survivor, there's an approach that I took, and it's that everybody was trying to be helpful. And I just kind of took what was said to me and tried to apply it to my situation, my journey. Again, I did this with the intention that people were saying things to me that might be true. They may not be true at the time. They might be true later down the road. They may take me 6 to 10 to 12 to 18 months to process, and I didn't want to be dismissive of people trying to be polite and kind and nice. And also I didn't want to make them feel like an asshole for saying something that could be wrong. Because again, they might be saying it with what works for somebody else, or what works for me may not work for somebody else, and vice versa. But some of the more some of the more common unhelpful statements, generally speaking, that I heard, I do think are rooted in helpfulness, but I think it is also timing plays a role as you start to unfold your situation and really be able to assess things. I think we all have heard the things that whether it's stroke recovery or life in general, it's not really a prescriptive linear path in a lot of cases. And that is no different with stroke. Before I get too deep in the weeds here, one thing I do want to say when it comes to stroke that I don't think a lot of people think about, and again, this is not just stroke specifically, this is, I think, any brain injury really, is very different than the typical broken bone, torn ACL, fracture of any kind. A brain injury is very different from those because a lot of times with a broken bone or let's say, there is no standard injury, but typically if you're sick, it takes X amount of time to get well, and you could expect in a month or less, you're probably going to be. And, the same is true with a broken bone, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a cast, if it's torn ACL, MCL, maybe it's a year, depending on what level of athletics you're in, or even just daily life, that rehab is going to look a little different person to person. But generally speaking, there is a time frame. When you break your brain and have a brain injury, whether it's stroke, whether it's TBI, whether it's concussion, whether it's some other event where you've had a neurological issue, the time frame is a lot less certain and a lot less prescriptive. And what I mean by that is, that kind of leads us into the phrase number one that you hear more often than not as a brain injury survivor is, it takes time. That is probably the number one phrase I have heard over the years, and I still hear it to this day. And it is my least favorite. It is completely unhelpful. However, over the last couple of years, I've realized people aren't wrong when they say it takes time. However, going back to it, again, that is not linear. It is not a path of certainty. It does take time, but nobody really explains to you how much time, what that means, because, okay, I think when you break that down, when people say it takes time, you sort of expect we often have this broken bone mentality, right? 6 to 8 weeks, I'll be good to go. Rocking and rolling, you put the cast on, you take the cast off in 6 to 8 weeks, give or take, depending on the severity. You do a little physical therapy for that finger, thumb, arm, leg, but a brain injury is like, if you know sports and you know the story of Alex Smith and his broken leg that got infected and multiple surgeries, that is more in line with what a stroke is. It is the worst case scenario. And so it does definitely take time. One of the things I wish people said early on when they said it takes time, that they clarified what that actually means. And what that actually means is this is another thing you hear. It depends on the person. That is also true, is a factual statement. So I guess my advice when you hear it takes time is, obviously it's not super helpful. It's not super specific. So I just kind of, over the last couple of years, it's like, okay, it takes time. To me, in my mind, anything I'm working on could be infinity, could take forever, may never happen. And anything short of, at this point, anything short of like the end of life for me would be a win. So I try to use that to just take pressure off myself, because I, like many survivors, have experienced different things. I think sometimes things just kind of, you get into a flow and you get into a rhythm and things start rocking and rolling. And you think, oh shit, I'm in good shape. This is really working. But then other times It could be the next day and nothing could be going your way. And, I think I'm in a unique position, but I think like many stroke survivors, there are good days and bad days. And sometimes one day you wake up, it's a step back. One day you wake up, it's 2 steps forward. It can just take a while. And I think, and again, just to remind everybody, sometimes I have a hard time putting real like definitive yes or no on certain things is because I had a stroke in December of 2019 at the age of 37, went to rehab January of 2020, and then came out of rehab, thought I was going to be at home doing some home health care, some inpatient or outpatient therapy. I got diagnosed with MS that February of 2020. I thought I was having a second stroke. So I went from being paralyzed on the right side of my body to getting home and working through that set of issues. And then immediately, because of that MS exacerbation and then subsequent diagnosis of having MS, I was partially paralyzed on the left side. So I was like a big hot mess. Like I still to this day, 3+ years, don't know what necessarily is affecting the other thing. Like, is it a stroke deficit? Is it the weakness from MS? Is this a combination? Is it left over? Was this an issue before? Like it is very kind of screwy. So going back to, the things that people say that are very unhelpful. Another one of my favorites is, you're lucky it wasn't worse. I don't know how for me it could have been worse. And I'm sure a lot of survivors feel this way. You hear this a lot. I just try to brush it off. With that one, I try to just be, every time I hear these things, I just do a hard eye roll. But when I hear it, it does remind me that it could in fact be worse. 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 lose their life. And a stroke, TBI, concussions, other brain injuries. It depends. I know it's very helpful. So when people say you're lucky it wasn't worse, I really hate that. I think it's awful to say to people. However, I do try to see the silver lining these days. And I think it's helpful to just realize, I've got a second chance. And that is a big thing I'm an advocate for, is trying to make the most of the second chance. I like to surround myself with other people who are ambitious. I do often make mention of my deficits to people just so they don't expect certain things, so that they're aware, hey, I used to be amazingly fast at these things. I'm a little slower. It takes me a little more time now. It's not an excuse. It'll get done. I just need an extra second, and I'm okay with that. I'm 40, had 3 kids and a wife. Like, I'm good with that. That's fine. So, yes, we're lucky it's not worse. We're lucky to be alive. I do think that is a big takeaway, is trying to make the most of that sort of second chance and opportunity. And I remind myself of that all the time, because there are days when I'm feeling down, and I think that's okay too, to be a little down, to have an off day. Give yourself a break. You've survived the stroke. Do not be needlessly hard on yourself, but also do push yourself when you think maybe, because I fell into that trap a little bit too. Sometimes I would not push myself as hard, and I just had to have an honest conversation with myself. Is this a bad day, or am I feeling a little more glum about things than I should? In my case, and should's a word I don't love, but sometimes you do have to ask yourself, am I okay? Can I push myself a little more, or have I pushed to exhaustion? And so that is something to be mindful of. Another thing that people say that I really love is that I'm too young to have a stroke. Again, I had my stroke at age 37. There are average age is 65, but there are certainly people younger than 37 that have had strokes. Definitely 40s and 50s. I would say teens and 20s is fairly uncommon, but you see it a lot on just, weird events, not very different from mine. Of course, I try to take a lot of ownership and tell people sort of my history and my story because I think I was doing myself no favors. But that being said, I don't think anybody's expecting to have a stroke at any age. And so, unhelpful as it is, again, I just try to appreciate when people are, that one's a hard eye roll. Like, you're too young to have a stroke. Like, well, thanks, but that's not helping me solve any problem, or really anybody solve any problem. But it's also very similar to the one this one I hated forever. It's, oh, you don't look like you've had a stroke. That is not a great thing to say to somebody who is a stroke survivor. However, again, with time, I've learned to appreciate that because it means to me that I'm putting in the work to at least feel a sense of normalcy, which I think is something a lot of survivors crave. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I know from my small groups and people I talk to fairly regularly in the community, they kind of feel they start to, it takes a mindset shift. It takes some time to get used to that, but eventually you appreciate that because it means you're putting in the work. It doesn't take away from the fact that days are hard and things that were easy are now difficult or take more time. I'm not trying to be dismissive of any of that. And I don't think the people that are saying you look great, or you don't look like you've had a stroke, are trying to dismiss the work and effort that goes into it. It's just, I do try to take that one as it's a personal sign that I'm doing the things that I want to do to get better, that I'm continuing to get better. And then my speed of things, my desire to be whatever I was before, those things may never return. We're 3+ years into this now, and that's okay for me. I'm okay with certain things, but there are certain things I still want to get better at. And so I'm working on them. So I just take that particular unhelpful statement and just really turn it in my favor. And again, this similar one is like, you're young, you're fit, which I was not when I first had my stroke. I'm fit now. Although I'm far from David Goggins, I am definitely on a path that is more in line with where I wish I had stayed since college. So I would say I got way off the rails in my 30s, but now I'm back on track. And I don't know if I ever want to be a shirtless runner or a six-pack runner, but, I can appreciate all the work I'm putting into my body now, and I'm not destroying it by drinking or smoking. So yeah, there is some motivation to keep looking good or try to keep getting better. Not something I've ever been accustomed to, being alignment size, but I don't know. My wife does it. It's very motivating. She's into fitness, different things than I'm into, but yeah, I think we're in our 40s and we're looking to stay in good shape and good health. And yeah, this stroke has been a real wake up for all of us. And sure, we want to model it for our children because we want them to be active. And, I think any survivor out there will agree with me. This is not something that is easy to recover from, and I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemies. So I will say on that front, this is sort of unhelpful, but I do think one of the goals is that in this podcast and in general is to help educate people, because I don't think, no, that's not true. I think a lot of people could survive a stroke. I think I just don't want people to have to learn the hard way, because it is a huge commitment. It has been a financial commitment. It has been a time commitment. My wife has been instrumental. My kids have been amazingly helpful. So, for as badly as this could have worked out, it's worked out really well in a lot of other ways. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And I think that is a big thing that I take away when it comes to getting better, and it's, yeah, like I said, the theme here is sort of these unhelpful things people say to you. and how do you react? But I think to that point, it's, there are things that you learn along the way that you don't necessarily see in the beginning. Like when people were just saying it takes time. I used to get so pissed because I'm like, how much time I want to put in this work? And I think that's another big thing. No, I don't think I said this already, but with these unhelpful statements that people say, I think there are alternative ways of thinking. And it's like, acknowledging, like there is a significant severity to having a stroke and there are long-term effects. And so if you do get that second chance, take advantage as the survivor. If you're not the individual survivor, again, these statements, instead of saying these blanket statements that are sort of unhelpful, what are things that you could do as a supporter is offer support and encouragement. Can I help you, get to an appointment? How are you feeling? Talk. Very often survivors, I don't know if they'll tell you, but I will tell you, like, it's very lonely sometimes. And I have a huge support system. Well, not huge. Sorry. I have a great support system. I would say it's not huge, but it is very organized. Probably because I'm a little obsessive about it. But yeah, the team and the family that I have in place, I've worked closely with all my family members, from my own children to my wife, to my sisters, to my brother-in-law. Like, they've been amazing every step of the way. And yeah, we've all made mistakes. And in some cases, it's actually led to pretty big disagreements. But on top of that, they've been super supportive, and we have got to a place where everybody's been helpful, feels helpful, isn't saying something super dumb, which I think I can speak for my whole family. Everybody connected to me. I'm the king of saying stupid shit. So I think nobody is worried about saying the wrong thing when it comes to me in the stroke and the situation. And everybody is fine with me taking the blame. And I am even fine with taking the blame when it comes to saying unhelpful things. But, they've all recognized that difficulty. They've been supportive. They've spoken to me when I felt down or alone, or, listened to me babble on about how frustrating it could be. Because I think sometimes people forget one of the most frustrating things about a stroke, besides unhelpful statements, which, again, generally people don't mean to be unhelpful. They just are unhelpful. And I always struggle with trying to educate and help people understand that this is really a lot more difficult than they understand. They want to understand. And I don't even know if I'm doing that great of a job communicating it, but it is incredibly difficult to overcome this, this kind of event. And I think in my case, why I always say I had a stroke and followed up with the MS is because, sadly, that is exactly what happened. But to further illustrate the point, the stroke was like getting hit with a baseball bat, right? Getting knocked down to the ground. You're starting to get back up. And then 2 months later, I got diagnosed with MS and had that exacerbation. And that's like getting hit with a baseball bat, getting knocked down, starting to get up, and then just getting hit with a baseball bat again. It is incredibly difficult. And I don't talk about this a lot because it is hard to admit. I mean, I was just about knocked the fuck out, to be perfectly blunt. Like, not a lot of things take me out, but this totally crushed me. And I'm really glad I thought about this a ton today for some reason, because I think I knew I was recording. And so on today's run, I was thinking about this. Like, I don't honestly, and I've said it before, and it sounds a little arrogant, but please bear with me. I don't think a lot of people could handle this. This is insane when you think about it. To get hit, knocked down again. Like, I mean, yeah, I was knocked down, hanging on for dear life the first time. Then I get hit again and hanging on by a thread. Now I can look back and it's kind of funny, but it is, I mean, I've done some incorrect things in my life, but I'll be honest, like, made a couple dumb mistakes, I'm sure, as a kid, but I was thinking about it. I was like, the hell did I do to deserve, the stroke? I think in a way saved my life. But what did I do to anybody at any point in my life? Like, I've only wanted to help people and I've only wanted the best for people. So it was really like, it's making me emotional thinking about it. It's like, honestly, I fight hard every day because I am not ready to give up. Of course, I'm not ready to give up. I got a family to support. There's that. I got 3 kids and a beautiful wife who's amazing. I got 2 sisters who I love. My parents are gone, but I still want to continue the legacy on their behalf. And I think that's kind of circling back and wrapping this up, though. And I'm sorry for getting emotional. It's just, I just keep thinking about it and I'm like, wow. It's kind of really hitting me and I'm recognizing all the work that I put in and, you hear this shit. It takes time. And, it sucks at the time to hear that it takes time. But after a couple of years and looking back, you can see that hard work pay off. And it's still annoying because it's not linear. There's nothing clear about any part of the rehab process because I put in thousands of hours typing and my typing is still garbage and my left hand still wanders all over the place, which is super annoying because, okay, I was right-handed. I had a left brain stroke, so it affected the right side of my body. Why is my left hand wandering off the keyboard? The left side should be pretty much stable. The right side is pretty much stable. There's just some lingering issues. So, it's okay. I'm not complaining again, because it does take time. And I now recognize that it takes time. It takes a lot of fucking time. And I think the hardest thing, I wish when people said it takes time is that they were really more clear. Like, this is going to be a really tough road. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to hear that in the beginning, but one doctor told me it, and I actually didn't like that doctor. And now I respect the hell out of that doctor because he gave it to me the way I needed it. He didn't sugarcoat it. I sure wish he was a little more specific in terms of the details, but yeah, it takes a while and it may take me the rest of my life. So recapping, I think people say unhelpful things, but I do think they have good intentions. The takeaways, it takes time. You're going to hear it over and over again, just like you've heard on this podcast. I think anything short of infinity is a win. That's my take. You may have a different take, but I think, 10x whatever you think the amount of time will take, because I think anything less than 10xing the amount of time, you'll shortchange yourself and you'll end up being disappointed. Maybe the approach for you should be, and looking back, maybe I should have had this approach was like, here, I'm on the bottom. I mean, I think I did kind of like, I'm on the bottom, right? And I'm just going to keep trying to raise the floor rather than having a bar set super high that I can never get to. I'm just going to raise the floor. It's a very small mindset shift. However, if you keep raising the floor, you'll get higher to the bar without falling. Versus if you just try to jump to the bar, you may fall. And these other things, I think talking with other survivors, again, bringing it back to why I'm starting a community of survivors is because I'm 3 years in, I still need help. I wish I had other help from fellow survivors. I think hearing other people's stories is super helpful. It's super helpful when you're in a rehab facility in the early days, but those people are, what are they, a couple weeks at most ahead of you? So you're not getting to meet and talk to people that have been 3-4 years ahead of you. in the journey. And I think that's a little more helpful. So that's the precipice about creating Survivor Science is, it's really a community of folks who want to thrive, who really want to rebuild their life and really take full advantage of that second chance. Maybe it's your third chance, fourth chance. I don't know. It doesn't matter what chance it is. It's just people that are interested in continually getting better and keep doing the work. And, there's a lot more to it, and we'll talk more about it on future episodes, but that's sort of the main idea behind the community is finding other folks who are really interested in doing the work. Maybe you've tried different things, sharing what you've learned along the way, and I think that community will be great for listeners of this podcast, but also just finding and connecting with other people who are maybe doing similar things to you. Kind of like LinkedIn, kind of like networking, kind of like Twitter, but just different, and the cool thing I think about a community, especially being the creator of a community, is that, you got your own personal 6'8", 325-pound bodyguard, which not everybody could say, and not everybody could say they have a 6'8", 325-pound survivor friend who's also a survivor himself. I got 3 kids and a wife, and I've had a stroke and I have MS, and I just turned 40, and I don't know. I'm excited about it, and I hope you are too. And yeah, I think we'll kind of leave it there. But in closing, I just want to say, I do get mad sometimes, but I just try to respect people that are, maybe they're not as knowledgeable about stroke, and they do say things with the best of intentions. So if you're not a stroke survivor or you said these things, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat up other people. Just know that sometimes, even though it's well-intentioned and even if it's well-received, it could be unhelpful. And just to be aware, I think it's like anything else in life. We say things, we maybe say the incorrect thing, we learn from it, and we try to grow and get better. And again, I never fault anybody for saying the quote unquote wrong thing. I do it all the time. So I think when as long as I could tell people are genuinely being encouraging and supportive and trying to uplift, I have no judgment. It's just for the individual survivors. I do recommend trying to kind of flip the script and getting away from that negative thought that it may trigger a negative thought. It's okay. Have that and process it, and then, reset, and then talk to if you need to talk to a particular person, talk to them. Again, I think it goes back to making the most of that second chance. So anyways, we'll leave it there for this episode, and see you next time.